Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this breakfast session today. So, today we have Martin speaking from the OSR Co-op project in Ireland. So we're looking forward to hearing his presentation today. So how it will follow will be that Martin will give a 15-minute presentation, and then there will be 45 minutes open for a Q&A session. So it's good to note that we'd like to understand who you are and before you ask a question. So when you'd like to ask a question after Martin's finished his presentation, please either raise your hand or use your microphone to say who you are, what organization you're from, or energy community, for networking purposes. And in this regard, we are also recording the session. So if anyone has any issues with this being recorded, please make that clear now, because we will put this on our website in the future, and would also like to share email addresses with each other, obviously for networking purposes again. And yeah, just a bit of background about the project. So we're the Rural Energy Community Advisory Hub, and we have been developing a range of best practices, one of which is Martin's energy community. So he's got some really useful and good insights to share today. And we've also been developing a set of guidance documents and providing technical assistance to energy communities across EU member states. So yeah, we're really excited to have you here for this fifth breakfast session, and I'll hand over the floor to Martin to start his presentation.
Okay, James, thank you very much. So my name is Martin O'Malley, and I'm the General Manager of Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative here in the middle of Ireland. And we're currently renaming and rebranding. We've already done the renaming, and we're just in the throes of rebranding now as Energy Community Vision, shortened up to Eco Vision. So we are in a project called OSR-Coop, and the OSR-Coop project, of course, you'll be wondering what's that about. So if I'll have the next slide, please. Okay, so it's One Stop Renovation Coop's project. It's a 3-year project from October 2022 until November 2025. The aim is to create models of integrated one-stop shops for renovation services replicable across Europe. And of course, then when you're wanting to replicate anything across Europe, there are country contexts, and there are different regulatory contexts and everything that have to be taken into account. And I'll be saying more about that after. And indeed, that's always an interesting topic for discussion. So we might even discuss that when we get to the Q&A part after. And this is a project, of course, funded by the EU LIFE programme. The LIFE programme, as it says here, the European Union, carried out by a consortium of 5 EU partners and supported by one UK based service provider, which is actually People Powered Retrofit. We can have the next slide, please. Okay, so the OSR-Coop project objectives: obviously to optimize integrated one-stop shop service models for deep home renovations that are being run by citizens' energy cooperatives, a model called One Stop Renovation Cooperative Service, or OSR-Coop. So that's where the name that's where the name of the project is coming from. I suppose I should emphasize here that what we're talking about here in the project, what we're looking at, is how we can optimize the service models for citizen energy cooperatives. So we're talking about citizen-led renovation, as opposed to, I suppose, a big flash company-led renovation. And really what we want to develop are models that are replicable by citizen-led organizations. So obviously there are challenges, I suppose, and there are differences between trying to come up with a model that's going to work for citizen-led organizations versus obviously what would work for big companies with endless resources and all of that. So we're looking to see how we're going to do this in a way that, like, community energy collectives or community energy groups or cooperatives are able to replicate what we've already been doing, and then what we will be presenting, I suppose, then as like sort of, you know, the best case scenario for groups then moving forward. So we're carrying out an iterative process of testing these service models in real life pilots. So in the project at the moment, we have just finished work package 2, and work package 2 in this project was basically the deep mapping and evaluation and analyzing of all of the steps of the renovation services that the 3 organizations within the project are already providing, and that we would then do that deep mapping. So we've done that, and then that we analyze all of that and we evaluate all of that, and then that we then determine what are the changes to the services or the optimizations of the services that we're going to carry out, and that we're then going to test in real life situations to see how will they work and how then can they fit into the replication models that we'll be developing towards the end of in the second half of the project, really. So we're going to transcribe the learning into a detailed replication toolkit that allows replication by all citizen energy cooperatives and communities across Europe. So that's a big ask there. So there's about 3,000 at least of those organizations that have been recognized. And so of course, it's a big challenge now to come up with a replication toolkit that's going to suit all 3,000 of those. But then obviously, like I said, we have to take into account, you know, I suppose the national context, and then there's cultural context as well. And then of course, there are the various regulatory frameworks in the different countries across Europe, which are not all the same, of course, at the moment, and see how we're going to then best suit those. If we could have the next slide, please. Okay, so the One Stop Shop Renovation Co-op project partners. So in Belgium, we have Energent, and Energent, of course, you'll be able to look them up after. Energent do work very similar to Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative, for example, but Energent have a range of services where, for example, they can provide advice and then help their clients. We'll call them clients, even though like we call them customers, and then Les Servants, who are also a partner, they refer to them as citizens, and that's fine. So in any case, we're talking about European human beings who want to undertake home energy upgrades at different levels. So Energent actually have an interesting system where, for example, in terms of renovation in homes, they can actually assist their customers or clients with, like, let's say, for example, they go to a building and there's something actually that can be done quite easily to that building. We'll call it a piece of low-hanging fruit, where something can be done quite simply and quite efficiently to that building. Well, then they can help them to do that, or they, of course, like the other organizations, can steer people the right direction so that they do a full building retrofit, we'll say, from the under the floor to the top of the roof and everything in between. Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative, of which I'm the general manager, and now renaming and rebranding as EcoVision, standing for Energy Communities of Vision. ECTC, as we call it for short, has been doing citizen-led renovation now for 12 years. It's an organization that actually started out of a conversation that was held in a community hall where some people were discussing with each other about doing some home energy upgrades, and they actually formed a citizen energy group. And then bit by bit, they got more members, and now there are 15-member communities. And over the last 12 years, with investment, mostly through grant aid, government grant aid, have done home energy upgrades on almost 1,000 homes, with the total investment of 13.5 million euros. So that's quite a feat for a citizen-led organization. And so obviously we're the second partner there in this project. And then Les Servants in France, a very interesting organization that's on the road for a long time. Les Servants, for example, one of their specialties is they do a lot of work around like behavioral change and training, and even we did some training with them around the behavioral change stuff that they do. But Les Servants are in an interesting position in that, like in France, apparently there's state funding for, we'll say, the very first part of the process of the customer journey, which of course is the awareness and all of that, and then that there's state aid in France as well for having like the initial audits carried out on the home. So they're in a very interesting position. So those three partners are, I suppose, really the sort of the operational partners in terms of actual home energy upgrades. And then RECAH, of course, everyone will be familiar, of course, with RECAH and the European Federation of Energy Co-ops. And RECAH then are there and are a core member of the project, of course, but their specialty within this project then is around communications and dissemination, and of course they're a fabulous organization to get the word out there. And then of course RECAH also within the project will be focused on the replication toolkit and all of that. And then Snap Solutions, who are the project coordinator, again, fantastic organization who know what they're doing. So we have 5 partners there who are all very good and very experienced at what they're doing. So if I could have the next slide, please. Okay, so 2 important topics and areas of work. And so the citizen-led renovation, on go the glasses, citizen-led, you'll all have the glasses someday. Citizen-led renovation, citizens are involved in the renovation process and governance of the initiative. So that's obviously very important for those of us who are into citizen-led stuff. Cooperatives act as a trusted partner. So that's the thing. So because I suppose there's that aspect of it that when you're a citizen-led organization or you're a cooperative with like members from the local communities or whatever, then obviously you come with a different level of trust, or you're viewed differently, obviously, by people than if you were some big brand named company or someone of the big energy, power provider companies like we have in Ireland here, who are doing One Stop Renovation now. The development of local businesses and skills of people involved is supported. So, of course, with citizen-led renovation, and certainly I can speak for Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative to say that, like, one of the things that we're really focused on is that, like, as part of this work that we're doing, that we're helping to keep employment locally, that the work that we're doing is feeding into other community development processes. And obviously that's important, and that the member communities, that what we're aimed at is actually bringing benefit, not only economic benefit and not only in terms of like employment and all of that, but also like social benefit and of course cultural benefit as well, by keeping the area alive. And so that's very important, that there's local involvement. And then solutions are adapted to local conditions. And that's very important. And that's actually one of the things that we're looking at within the OSR-Coop project, is that, like, yes, so we may come up with some sort of we'll call it the generic replication tool at the end of this project, but we clearly recognize that any solutions that we're coming up with will have to be adapted to local conditions, as I had said already. One-stop shops, they're integrated services for renovation offered in one place or one stop. Well, really, so the one-stop shop really, even like, the virtual one-stop shop, what that really means is that, like, when the client or the customer or the citizen comes along, for example, to, in our case, ECTC, Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative, basically from the very first phone call, we're able to help them with the whole process and make it hassle-free. And that basically, once we've made contact with that citizen and they've clearly stated that they would now like to get on with doing the home energy upgrade, we are a one-stop shop in as much as they don't actually have to go and talk to anybody else. Then we handle the whole process from having the home energy audit carried out, and then putting together the design of the renovation work, the retrofitting work that would be done to the building. And then we then, as the one-stop shop, we handle all of the paperwork, and we do all of the work in our case with SEAI, which is the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. So we handle all of the paperwork around the grant aid, and then we deal with the contractors who will actually do the work. And then we have independent people then who are independent of us as an organization, who then do the auditing of the work. And then basically at the end, the homeowner then is, we'll say, given back their home now with the renovation works completed and the paperwork completed and all of the stuff around the grant and everything done. So basically they don't really have to do a lot except first make contact and make it be known that they want this work done. And then, of course, you know, they have to sign contract papers and pay their share of the money in 2 different stages along the way. So that's what's really meant by the one-stop shop, is that everything is handled by the one-stop shop provider organization. And so it just makes it really easy for the citizen. The project, so in our project, the project addresses detected limitations of current one-stop shop models. So of course there are various hurdles and obstacles and issues and challenges within the existing one-stop shop models. And so within the project, we're scrutinizing those so that those challenges can be addressed, and so that we can see how we can best get over those and make it easy then for new one-stop shops, citizen-led renovation one-stop shops that we'll be setting up. Advantage of energy co-ops offering renovation services through one-stop shop is local communities trust. So we've said that already in terms of citizen-led renovation, that obviously when you're a local organization like our organization here in Ireland, and people know who you are, and obviously there's a level of trust there that would be different to what you would have, like I said, you know, with the big commercial company. And then I would just like to point out about Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative, for example, which is a very good example of a European citizen-led renovation organization. That any profit, like we're a not-for-profit organization now, and let me point out to everyone, like not-for-profit doesn't mean that you don't make a profit, because if you're not making some kind of a profit somewhere along the line, you're making a loss, and then your organization would not be sustainable. But any profit that is made and then that ends up within the assets of ECTC in this case is churned back into community development or the development of the organization. And in our case, we have a situation where, like, for example, from energy credits, so from the small amount of money per project that comes in from the energy credits, and we're then able to use that for energy related projects then within our energy communities, of which there are currently 15. If I could have the next slide, please. Oh, so the next slide is actually that I'm at the end. So basically that's just a brief overview of the one-stop shop renovation co-op project. And I see some people on here. There's some people on there that I know already. So hello and good morning and Kaisho and all of that. So I'll hand back over to James now.
Thanks, Martin. That was a really interesting presentation. So yeah, now we'd like to open the floor to questions. So if you'd like to raise your virtual hand, if you'd like to ask a question, and then just also state your name and some context about where you're from and your energy community organization.
Wow, I must have done a really good job. There's nobody going to ask any questions at all.
Beatrice, you have a question?
Hi, yes, and thanks for super interesting. That's why I have questions for you. Thanks for
Very
the
good.
overview. Really best practice. My name is Beatrice Petrovic. I'm an energy and climate analyst at Ember, which is a non-profit think tank, providing data insights for the energy transition. And before that, I was a researcher at University of St. Gallen in Switzerland when I did research on participation in energy communities. So what are the drivers, barriers? So still very passionate about energy community solution. And I have two questions for you. One, so I understood that you work with private citizens, so residential homes, as far as I understood. In our research, we found out that small and medium enterprises around Europe would be super interested in upgrade of their energy performance, their energy buildings, their headquarters, and are also happy to pay for that. And also prefer local context, which is one of your competitive advantage. So I was wondering what you have ever considered, have SMEs among your clients, and why not, if not, and if one of your service model is going in that direction.
Okay, thank you, Beatrice. So actually, yes, I did emphasize in my presentation, I did emphasize about the renovation of homes. And the straight answer to your question, Beatrice, is that that we do in ECTC here in Ireland, in Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative, we do as part in particular of the under the Better Energy Communities grant aid system from the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland. We do community buildings, and we have done the buildings for small businesses, and even we have done some shops, and we have done, for example, some shops where now one of the things they're doing in a lot of stores is where they're like replacing the refrigeration now with instead of these big open units that are just like energy guzzlers, now they're replacing those with the units that have the doors that can close. And so the answer to your question is that yes, we have been doing some of those, and we are looking now at trying to do more of those. So that is a good question, and you're right. I did emphasize the renovation of homes, but we are doing community buildings. We've done a lot of community buildings, and we have done some like commercial properties like shops and stuff like that. And yes, so we're actually looking to within ECTC now here, which is rebranding, as I said, as EcoVision. We are actually looking now to broaden our horizons and to broaden out in terms of, I suppose, our client base. Like we're made up of 15 sustainable energy communities, and we're going to be looking, excuse me, to broaden our membership base, and also then to broaden the level of services. Like even as part of the project now, we will be looking to improve our services and to broaden our services and to make the home renovation more accessible. And we will also now be working with, and we did previously have an arrangement with one of the credit unions, and now we're looking to broaden our horizons in terms of the offering, in terms of financing for both citizens and, I suppose, small to medium enterprises that want to do energy upgrade work.
Super, thank you.
Okay, thanks. And did you have a second question?
Oh yeah, so many questions. So maybe just also a quick follow-up. Are these small businesses happy to participate in the cooperative? Do they have to become cooperative members if they got your service, or would they stay independent? So as part of your like people-led approach, are these
Yes.
businesses?
Right. So our approach to membership at the moment, which is actually also under review so that we can broaden our membership. But basically, we aim to deliver services for our member communities because it's their organization, but we're not so conservative or so restrictive like that we wouldn't offer services to those outside of the membership. But we aim primarily to provide services for our members. But then, of course, like we're in the we're in the game of trying to get as many buildings as possible upgraded in terms of energy efficiency. So like, no, everybody doesn't have to be a member for our organization to do work for them or to help them to access energy upgrades. But primarily, yes, we're aimed at our member communities, but we also provide services outside of our member communities.
So thank you. Maybe I'll keep it very short because there's another one. Have you experienced lack of professionals that implement your solutions on the ground?
Sorry, say that again.
Have you experienced lack of skilled professionals that can implement your solution?
Yes, that's a very good question. So actually, one of the limiting factors right now in Ireland is, and I know this is not just in Ireland, yes, a limiting factor in Ireland and a big challenge in Ireland now is capacity in terms of those skilled and qualified people who are able to do the home energy upgrade work. So obviously, even in terms of like, wrapping a building or whatever it is, yes, there is a shortage of skilled operators in Ireland. And actually, the list...
Estamos o pegamos un telefonazo vía correo, ¿vale? Y comentamos esto.
Francisco, you might mute yourself. Yeah, there you go. So basically, the capacity issue in Ireland is being addressed, but obviously it's a slow process. I mean, you don't suddenly overnight, you can't decide that, oh, we need more people who are able to do this work and that you're going to have them trained in a matter of months or whatever. It's not that type of a situation, but the capacity is building up, but building up slowly. So in Ireland, the quite optimistic goal of the Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland and the government goal is that we would have 500,000, that's 500,000 home energy upgrades completed by the year 2030. That is a very, very optimistic figure, right? And really the thing of all of the things that would hold us back from getting, I suppose, close to that. And it's not for me to say now here on a European forum whether we will or will not achieve that goal. I'm just saying that that's a very optimistic goal. And obviously we'd be delighted if we could achieve that. But capacity, that capacity that you're actually asking about there, Beatrice, is really probably the biggest limiting factor in terms of how much energy upgrade would actually be done over the period of time. So yes, the answer to your question after all of that blah blah that I've gone on with there is that yes, capacity is the issue actually.
Thank you, Beatrice. Really interesting questions.
Yeah.
Now I'd like to pass the mic to Guillermo. Please, could you give some context about your position and fire away with your question? Thanks.
Yes, of course. So, well, first of all, thanks for organizing these like breakfast sessions, and I'm really enjoying. And thanks, Martin, for your presentation. I have a more general question. Well, I'm Guillermo Borragan. I work in Vito Energyville in Belgium. It's a research center, and I'm working in sustainability and climate change. And we work a lot, obviously, in energy communities, as is definitely something important that is happening. And I was wondering, again, from a more general perspective, there is a lot of research now ongoing on how energy communities can somehow open up new possibilities for the energy poor, right? Integrating them a little bit, creating this social justice. And I was wondering if in your project, your experience, you are also facing these challenges.
Yeah, so very good question, Guillermo. And so one of the things that we are also focused on, and we've actually just done a pilot project, is around, we did a pilot project where we have done some home visits, and where we have basically been doing home visits, and then mostly of, like, you know, vulnerable households or vulnerable citizens, and to address the energy poverty. And we're very aware of that, and we're very aware that, you know, there are homes in Ireland and in all the countries across the EU, and indeed around the world, where people are in the position where, you know, they're actually not even able to consider home renovation or anything like that, because they are too busy figuring out how they're going to buy the groceries and the food to feed their family next week, and also to still have enough coins left over to you know, to put into the electricity meter, where they've had to have the meter has been fitted by the energy provider that has to be operated by the coins, because previously they weren't able to pay the bill. So we're very aware of energy poverty, and indeed that's an issue now that we're going to be addressing in another project that hopefully would be starting early next year with some other partners. And so we are aware of that. And actually that's a big question that needs to be addressed, obviously, at all of the different levels. And energy poverty. So the people who are really energy poor, they're not even really thinking about home energy upgrades, or like, they're not going to be contacting us because that's not where they're at. Like I say, they're more focused on survival, and you know, like looking down the road at, if I'm planning for 6 months down the road to carry out home renovations or whatever. They're not even in a position like to consider that. So yes, we are very, very aware of that, and that's something that, like I say, we have done a couple of pilots on, and that we're hoping to address further. And then obviously there are other organizations then around Europe who have a lot of expertise around that. Like I see Idar is here from Goyenair, and they are an organization like that has a lot of work done obviously around energy poverty and all of that, and it'd be worth looking at their website and the work that they have done. And indeed there are other organizations as well that are currently doing work in that regard, and that are planning on doing work in that regard.
Okay. Yes, thanks a lot for your answer.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Guillermo. Does anyone else have a question and they'd like to ask? If not, I have a question.
Okay.
So I was wondering about what kind of indicators you use in terms of the optimal business model, which you were referring to before, which is replicable. So in kind of what are the things that you look for when trying to transfer and make it replicable to other contexts?
Okay, so where we're at right now, that's a really good tricky question there, James. Okay, so where we're at right now with the OSR co-op project is that we have just completed the work package 1. With any of those projects is always around the management and coordination of the project and all of that. And then in our case, the work package 2 that we have just finished. And indeed, I would urge people actually that there's a webinar later today, a RECAH webinar. And so if you go onto the RECAH, in fact, it was there in the last slide of the presentation. If you go onto the RECAH Facebook page, or I think on LinkedIn, or on obviously just onto the RECAH website. Oh, here it comes. There you go. Check out osrcoop.rescoop.eu, and then go onto the RECAH website itself, and you will see that there's a very interesting webinar on now later on in the late afternoon today that would be worth people's while to check into. So where we're at, to come back to your question there, James, so where we're at in terms of the project is we have just finished work package 2. Work package 2 is the part, as I said, where we were doing like the deep mapping and like really drilling into the customer journey of citizen-led renovation with the 3 organizations who were in the project, and then also our supporting organization, who are a contracted supporting organization, actually is People Powered Retrofit in the UK, who also have a lot of experience. So what we're looking at right now is, okay, all of everything in the customer journey, and then everything that affects the provision of services and everything, including the business model. But like, we're at like too early a stage for me to come out and say, make any sort of a statement whatsoever around like, oh, well, yeah, actually, this is probably the ideal business model, or that other thing is the ideal business model, because we're not actually at that point yet. But you will notice that the name of the project is OSR Cooperative. So, I mean, my own organization, Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative, actually is a company limited by guarantee, but we operate on, you know, using cooperative ethos and cooperative principles. So, you know, obviously, like, we're leaning towards cooperatives and all of that, but we're not at the stage within the project where we're in terms of like replication models or whatever, that like, you know, that we're already saying, oh, well, you know, we think that this is the ideal solution in terms of the business model.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks a lot for that.
But co-ops are good.
Yeah, yeah,
of
the
course.
principle. Yeah.
Anyone else have any nice awkward question there now for me?
I have one.
Okay, Henry.
Yes. Potentially not quite as awkward. It actually follows up from Beatrice's question, where you mentioned the capacity building in Ireland. I know that in the UK, for a lot of the sort of government funding that goes towards housing associations, they then contract the work out, and most of the people that have to do the retrofits, the skilled workers, have some sort of certification called PASS certification, and that can be the retrofit designer, also the installers. So a lot of the work basically around the renovation does something like that exist in Ireland? And if so, do you feel like that is a hindrance, or do you think that that's necessary for the sort of insurance of the quality of the work? Be interesting to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, really good. Thank you, Henry. That's a really good question. Okay. Without doubt, like, when we have citizens now spending their money to have home renovations done, right? The last thing anybody wants is that somebody, like, that's a big life decision for, let's say, you know, some couple who are, you know, even, you know, around, you know, my age. So I'll use myself as an example. I'm 58 years of age. My wife, Geraldine, she's 61, right? It would be a huge, big decision for us that we're going to, say, for example, borrow some money from the credit union or from some other financial organization, or for maybe some couple who are just at retirement age, and so as part of their pension package, you know, they get a lump sum, and then that they're going to use that to do a home renovation. The last thing you would ever want is that they would spend their money, they would go to all that trouble and spend their money to have renovation done, and then a bad job is done. So anywhere, in particular, where you have grant aid available from the government towards like home energy upgrades. So we'll use the Irish situation now as a good example to address your question. In Ireland, through the SEAI, there are actually quite generous grants available for home energy upgrades. And then there are other grants through different schemes of the SEAI for like community buildings, or even for some smaller commercial buildings or whatever, through various schemes. So of course, there would be any amount of people out there who would, if they were allowed, who would chance their arm and would be out there doing this work and like taking in the money and not necessarily doing a good job if they were allowed to do that. That is not the case in Ireland. The SEAI, to allow anyone to call themselves a one-stop shop or even to qualify for grant aid through the Better Energy Communities scheme, for example, or the Community Energy Grant Scheme and other schemes that are run by SEAI, there are very, very strict controls. And I have to say that we in Energy Communities Tipperary Cooperative, and I myself, with a lifetime of work experience behind me, I completely agree that there should be very, very tight controls, not so tight that, like, you know, nobody can ever be qualified to do the work, but it is absolutely necessary that there are strict controls in place that ensure the quality of the work that is being done. So again, I can say, as with my sort of a bit of a almost an elder lemon hat on, that one of the most important things when it comes to carrying out anywhere, no matter what work it is that you're doing, that you're always looking at quality management and that you're always looking to improve the quality of the service that you're providing, right? So the qualifications thing is very important, and anybody, even the people who are already qualified to be doing home energy upgrades, anybody doing any kind of work should always be looking to, you know, to further their qualifications, because there are always improvements in materials or changes in regulations or whatever. And so the answer to your question, Henry, is yes, we do have that in Ireland, and yes, that should be there. And yes, quality management should be like right up there, you know, with health and safety and all of the other things that are up in the top of the list when you're doing any kind of work like that. Has to be. There have been cases, and I'm aware of cases, not within my own organization or our own projects, but I am aware of cases like where there have been situations where even like a group have come together and got some contractors in, like to do some home renovations, and that they have been left disappointed after the whole process. They have their money spent, and then, you know, over time or even over the first winter or whatever, you know, have discovered that the work that was done was actually not up to standard. And like, that's a disaster. None of us want that happening to anybody. Have I answered your question?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Very good.
Mhm. Yeah, that's very interesting. Would anyone else like to ask a question to Martin? So I'll ask another one. I'll try and not make it as awkward as last time. I'm just wondering, what is there any key kind of lessons learned from your experience with working with citizen-led renovation one-stop shops, as to like what works well, what kind of what can we take from it, and what can we pass on to future learning and projects?
Well, I suppose one of my own observations, actually, I'll just point this out. One of my own observations so far is that there isn't, I think one of the questions that definitely needs to be addressed is equal access to information, or equal access even to awareness. So in different countries across the EU, in some countries, there is actually, we'll say, state financial aid for the awareness part of the process, and even for the initial home energy audits. So you could be in one country where everybody actually is entitled to have at least a basic home energy audit carried out, and where there are specific campaigns, like specific awareness campaigns around that. And then in other countries, you don't have anything. So, for example, like some of my colleagues from around the EU that I would have met, at an event even earlier this year. It was very interesting in conversations that we were having that it came up that actually, like, so here in Ireland, actually, it turns out that we're one of the better off countries in terms of like grant aid and all of that for home energy upgrades. We actually have quite a generous system here in Ireland. And then you will speak to people from some other EU member states where they just don't have anything like that, and they just don't have a system of grant aid that actually helps the citizens to achieve even the national goals within, you know, within the national energy planning frameworks or whatever. So that's actually one of my biggest observations, I would have to say, so far now, James, is that there are actually such big differences between the countries in terms of access to information, access to awareness, and access then to something like that initial, you know, home energy audit that then puts people in a position to make, you know, a qualified decision around how much renovation work they might or might not need to do to their home.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Thanks a lot for that.
All right.
Would anyone else like to ask a question? Please either raise your hand or go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question.
I have one last question. I think it could be a bit of a two-pronged question, but I think my first one is, have you considered looking at energy production, renewable energy production as some of your activity? Obviously, there's been heavy focus on your side for energy efficiency. And then the second part is effectively, what would you say to energy communities with regards to uptake of energy efficiency improvements? Because obviously it's a massive part of the energy transition. And I would say that a large part of the energy communities we've seen in Europe, in particular, have a focus on renewable energy production. But obviously, energy efficiency is a major side of that.
Yeah. Okay. So to answer I'll have three answers now to the two questions. So to answer the first part of your question, yes, we part of the work that we do is, yes, we do facilitate, for example, you know, the fitting of PV solar systems to homes, and even in Loughmore in County Tipperary, there's the community cafe, and through one of the projects that we're running, like there's a PV system has been fitted to that building, and we have done, for example, in one of the communities we have done where there's, like, you know, rows of houses that are specifically for elderly members of the community, and so we have yes, we're already doing that, and now we're actually just about to embark on a new community solar PV project with a number of different buildings, and actually in one place where there's a building like with 14 apartments for vulnerable citizens, and where there are some small houses. So yes, we're doing, you're right, yes, we are doing that kind of work already, and that of course is an important element for the likes of any energy cooperatives. And then in terms of, like, so in terms of the grant system here, so yes, there are grants available for PV systems and all of that, but the approach here is fabric first. So that rather than spending your money putting a posh PV system on your house, for example, that the first thing you would do is address the fabric of the building, so that you make the building itself as energy efficient as possible. So we have the building energy rating system here, the BER system. So your home is either going to be like A1 or A1 plus, which means like that it's absolutely, you know, super duper, or it might be right down at, like, you know, F or something, which basically means that, you know, if you turn on the heating system, that, you know, that heat is all basically leaving the building, right? So the approach here in terms of like home energy generation is that like that you should approach the fabric of the building first, obviously, and then like okay, and then like putting in heat pumps and whatever, which are also grant aided if you bring the building up to a certain energy rating. And yes, then after that, of course, you would be looking at, you know, PV or any whatever else might be suitable. You could be looking at like sort of, you know, even micro wind or whatever, depending on where you are, all of that kind of thing. And then what was the second half of your question again, Henry? Basically,
the second half was obviously you've have a lot of focus on energy efficiency, and it was sort of what advice would you give almost to energy communities across Europe, because in Europe in particular a lot of the focus seems to be on energy production, and I think from a lot of our work in the last couple of years, obviously there are other cooperatives and communities, but the Energy Cooperative of Tipperary has a very large focus on energy efficiency.
yeah, that's because so Henry, as I said earlier in the presentation, like everything has to be looked at then in, you know, in the local context, in the national context, and also like in the climate and even like the meteorological context of where you are. So obviously, if you're up here where we are, like I actually live on an offshore island. I live on Cape Clear Island in West Cork, right? So everything is different. So the building even that will be energy efficient for me living on an offshore island, excuse me, is completely different to the building that will be energy efficient in Bilbao, for example, or that will be energy efficient up in Sweden or down in Croatia, or like obviously all because the climatic conditions are so different. So I think yes, so the focus, like the further north you go, I think the further, you know, the deeper you need to be going into the renovation of buildings and ensuring that the building is energy efficient. But then, of course, in other places where maybe the emphasis is more on energy generation, that might be because the you know, if you live somewhere where, you know, kind of the temperature, you know, the temperature is livable, without maybe focusing so much on the you know, the fabric of the building. And then maybe it makes more sense that they have more focus on energy generation, you know, on micro generation and all of that. So I think, like, not to be giving you sort of, you know, the Irish answer where somebody asks you something and the answer is kind of, well, oh, well, you know, yes and no. But the yes and no answer to your question is that yes, in some places, of course, it makes more sense to really be focused on the home energy upgrades or like the fabric first part of the building. And then, of course, in other places, because that's not as much of an issue, I suppose it makes sense that they're focused on energy production. Like there is no one, like there isn't any one size fits all for, like, you know, for the whole energy question anywhere, because of the whole thing of cultural and social and economic and other contexts within the different countries. And so, yeah, so we're not the same. And that's even one of the challenges that we have within the project, is that when we're producing a replication toolkit, that has to be adapted then to suit the different contexts around Europe.
Perfect. Thank you
Did
very
I
much.
answer your question at all?
No, that's great. That's really good. Thank you.
Really interesting, yeah. I think we have time for one more question. If anyone would like to come in with a final question, and then we'll close the session. I have one in case. So I was interested in when you mentioned about the social benefits. So I was just wondering, like, how that these one-stop renovation models like impact local communities and provide these social benefits, and potentially some examples of where it's worked well.
Yeah, so for example, so when you have like a sustainable energy community, or you have an a local energy community or a local energy group that come together, and where they, you know, where you have that sort of communities of practice kind of thing, where everybody's like, you know, focused on a goal or whatever. And just the fact that those people within a community are actually meeting up and then, you know, discussing what they're going to do. And then, you know, they bring about, you know, they do something locally, they do some, you know, not only around obviously, you know, energy efficiency or energy production, because obviously, like with energy co-ops and energy groups, you have people who are focused on like the environment, and then they also get focused on various, you know, environmental issues, and they do work locally and bring people together. And like, so for example, even last week, like we had to do a bit of a video clip for one of the projects that we're involved in, and I actually had to go back and just do a very short interview with an elderly gentleman who's living in one of the homes that have been fitted with PV, and like even that social, even the social impact of like where, you know, where the energy group is then interacting with the community, and in a lot of cases interacting maybe with more vulnerable member of the communities, because also obviously there's a strong emphasis on just transition, and there's a strong emphasis with citizen-led organizations, obviously of all kinds. But in terms of citizen-led energy organizations, there's a strong emphasis then on energy equality. And, you know, so those, you know, all of those kind of concepts and philosophies obviously are in the mix with citizen-led organizations and with community-led organizations. And like I say, just anything that brings people together, because as we've seen in particular, obviously then with the pandemic, we saw how people actually are more and more, maybe we're being separated physically, yeah, coming together like we're doing this morning virtually. But I think that whole thing of like people coming together and really the community aspect and all of that is very important and brings about social benefits. I hope I've answered your question, James.
Yeah, you did. Thanks. That's really interesting. So I think that's our time today. So thank you very much, Martin, for your very interesting presentation and insightful responses to the questions that we had today. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining this 5th session. I'd like to emphasize that we also have a session next week, which will be the final breakfast session. So I would emphasize you to go and sign up for that, which you can find the details on our website. This recording will be made available once the breakfast series is complete, and we would like also to facilitate the networking of parties involved. So yeah, thank you very much everyone for your time and participation.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.